folks, good evening to you. That was just to, I was just sharing that post dinner we should have some TV time. So that was just to introduce the topic. Is not a, I would not call it as a paradigm shift, but I would call it as a geospatial shift from what you had in the earlier lecture, the journey of architect's viewpoint, and from forest of Finland and I think 54, vertical tower of, I don't know, US or Venezuela, to somebody, the earthy agriculture and food engineer, we give you some perspectives of gadgetry and groundwork and groundwork. Okay, so the talk that I think I have about an hour, I'll take an hour. And I'll try to see if your eyes are like, although she said in India you should not have eye contact, but I try to have some eye contact and see if you are fatigued. I will try to shorten it, my talk, but try to cover as much as I can. So, you have my email ID there and my affiliation with the Center for Technology Automation for rural areas. Who doesn't yet know about the existence of Center for Technology Opportunities for rural areas at IIT? Everybody knows? Okay, good. Then I don't have to say anything about the center. I'll straight go to the topic that agriculture, food and nutrition, there's a huge connection, right, between agriculture, food and health. Larger than nutrition, it's health. So what was the proverb that can be learnt in the schools and English? The proverb in English, what is that proverb which establishes this link? Everybody knows? Agriculture, food and health. The proverb in English which we learned at 7th standard.
An apple a day keeps the doctor
away. An apple a day keeps the doctor away. Right? An apple a day keeps the doctor away. Right? So, there is this philosopher, Henry Thoreau. He made a very simple statement. He says, while stressing the importance of food, there's something I just read recently. Okay. So this Henry Thoreau, he says that a man himself considered, esteemed and happy when that which is his food is also his medicine. So that is what, in short, was said by that proverb. Apple a day keeps the doctor away. I have to begin with a disclaimer, though, that my talk is not something which you see on the internet, Top 101 foods that will fight you, from aging, So that's a disclaimer. You are expecting that, you will be disappointed. Okay. So I'll tell you what the journey will be in this talk. I will sort of, give you some factual information about agriculture in India, where we are vis-a-vis the global scenario in agriculture. Then I'll tell you what is the role of engineers and technologists, what role they can play in value addition through science and technology, methods of science and technology. And through 3 case studies that I bring here. Case study 1 is on food process engineering. Case study 2 is on farm mechanization, and I think that has been put on the Moodle now. There are some 2 reading materials that I have given, and I think it's already put, so you can, the details you can see it on the Moodle. But I just some selected slides only I show you here. And the case study 3 is our own project, my project with a colleague of mine in computer science department here. I'll sort of cover a little bit on what we did on deploying ICT for developing the IVRS mobile system for performance information supply. What is IVRS?
interactive voice
Response system. You phone a number and say that if you want your speak in English, you press 1, speak in Hindi. That's IVRS. Okay. And then I will of course have the concluding remarks on agro sector as to why, so very quickly, what are those 5 verbs that an engineer or a scientist? I would not say scientist, but what does engineer do? I would like to have some very simple questions. So just give me 5 verbs that function of an engineer is. What does engineer do?
You know, so
Solve. Okay. So solve problem. But in order to solve problem, okay, so this is the on a higher in a hierarchy, it's the higher, so like solve problem. So in order to solve problem, there are 5 actions or 5 verbs.
Observe.
Observe, correct? What is next? What is the next verb? I'm going to stop at 5. Identify. Observe and identify. Okay, perhaps.
design,
Design. Yes. Fourth. Fourth. Optimize.
execute,
Implement.
Right? Somebody said manufacture, or we can also call deploy. Right? So let me see what list I have prepared when I prepared this slide. So observe, measure. One of the important things, measure. You know, see, measurement gives you where you are. You know, where you are in terms of your benchmarks, things like that. You know, efficiencies or whatever you are designing. Then test for repeatability. You know, that's an engineer's job. You know, like let's say in food processing, what's big deal in food processing engineer that does? You know, at houses you do food processing. You know, it's kitchen processing as we call it. So how does it differ from a kitchen technology to a food processing engineering firm? You want to have repeatability. So Masti Dahi, which tests on Tuesday, it must test the same on Friday. Whatever it tested in January, it must test the same in December. Right? So that's what we call it, the repeatability there. Build. So we have something like manufacture or deploy, build, design and build. Okay? Technical and economical components there, and then deployment. Create value to society. Okay, not bad. I think almost 90% we covered there. Now coming to what I mean as an introduction to agriculture sector. So this is something I picked up sometime in June 2014. It's been in Times of India. So I put the source Times of India here. The inflation in food, for example, in our country, vis-a-vis what is happening in other, I mean, one of the main benchmark we consider is energy or oil. Everything is related to oil. Once the oil prices go up, everything goes up. Transportation goes up, fruits goes up. But see, for example, you look at this, you know, it's almost like double than what you see for other commodities. In agriculture, you see the inflation, and that created a big problem for our erstwhile government, right? That was one of the biggest problems as to, you know. The second important factual information, as you see, for example, over a period of time from, let's say, just after the independence till 2001, and graph is further coming down, this is the, on y-axis what you have is the percentage of population living in rural areas. So just after independence we had something like 80 to 82% people, more than 82% living in rural areas. So what does this indicate? It indicates there is a large scale migration, right? People are leaving rural areas and coming to the cities. Okay, so this is another factual information that we have. You know, this is, I have taken it from a source. Most of the time I have indicated the source. One of the principal issues in managing agriculture has been the soil and soil health. You know, so this has actually created some kind of a civil riots also in some of these studies, in most, the biggest 3 continents that I have mentioned here. And what this UN FAO estimate, you know, United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, it does forecast. It did a forecast that by 2030 we will have something like 8.3 billion people. What is the current population?
7 billion.
7 billion. So in 2030 13, something like that. I thought it was 5 billion, 7 billion. So we'll add another 1.3 billion. And in order to provide food, farmers will have to grow something like 30% more. Will have to grow 30% more, and land is not going to fall from sky. Right? There's no possibility of having extra land to produce that much more. So what it leads to, we must have higher productivity. Right? But this is something which is two contrasting things here. One is soil and soil health. Both the quantity and quality of soil is coming down. And on the other hand, you want to have productivity gains, right? 30% productivity gains. Now, is that possible? In India, for example, you had some phenomena in 1970s, 80s, which made us jump in production. What was that phenomena? Green revolution. Right? The green revolution happened in India. Now, unfortunately, we don't have evergreen revolution. We don't have evergreen revolution. We had one green revolution which did what it intended to do at that point in time, because PL 480 we came out, right, and we became self-reliant. We didn't have to depend for our staples for imported commodities like wheat coming from Australia and US and all that. So we became self-reliant, but post-green revolution we will subsequently see what kind of problems that we are facing. So, when we see some of these facts in India about soils and water also, when we have 30% more productivity because we have all learned only input intensive agriculture. Green revolution, what did it teach? It taught us that you have more water, you have more fertilizer, you have these varieties which are crossbred or hybrid, and they will respond to this high water, high fertilizer, and will give you higher productivity. So now I have put some question. Is it a significant activity, economic activity in India? If you take Indian context, is agriculture a significant activity? Yes, right. So how do we evidence this? Let me take you to that data. So this shows that this is a significant activity because percentage contribution by agriculture and allied activities, in today's context, I think it could be something about 15%. I mean, although it is coming down, the total contribution to whatever you call GDP from agriculture could be now about 15%, but it is significant, right? Significant contribution to the Indian economy. Now, is it one of the biggest employment sector in India? Right? See, world over it's something like 36% of the globally of the workers, 36% of the workers are employed in agriculture. Whereas in India it's about 60%, right? So it's a bit skewed that 60% of the people working and contributing only 15 to 20% of the GDP. So this raises further questions, and this is in fact which is coming from just about 10 days back. I took 50 students to a place called Nerar, and I think two of them are here. Right? 3 of you are here already. So they came with me to a trip to a place called Nerar, which is about 100 kilometers from here. And what did we see? Whom did we meet? Yeah, we met a farmer who has been working there for the last 2 to 3 decades. And these are the questions which he raised. He says, farming is something which is socially, neglected. So he perhaps would like to have a dignity of labor. He says, where is the dignity of farmer? Where is the dignity of farmer? Another question, he says, where is the prevalence? That there is a prevalence of farmer suicides, right? You would have heard of it, right? I mean, it's not only in Vidarbha of Maharashtra, but even in Punjab, which is sort of, supposed to be agriculturally rich state, you have suicide, farmer suicide, right? So, do we have any solutions on this? So, this is Mr. Shekhar Patsale, whom we just mentioned, and he proposed some of the solutions. Okay, so he's an agriculture graduate who settled there in Neral, and last 2 to 3 decades, and actually you can go to a website called sagunabapu.com, and you can see, for example, in detail what are the kinds of activities that he's engaged in addition to horticulture and aquaculture and conventional rice farming. He's doing something what is called agrotourism, and he just got about 5 years back a Khushi Pandit award for introducing this kind of agrotourism. What he does is on the weekends he invites a lot of these college-going students and school students and their parents on his farm. And on the day we went, we had something like 400 people, right? And he said the next day, we went on a Saturday, and the next day he was saying that 700 visitors were expected on his farm. He said that gave him a dignity. About 30 years back when he came back from US after some MS education, he says for about 10 years he struggled to sort of find his identity as a farmer. Right? Somehow the society did not recognize, and he's trying to do that through agrotourism, and he's trying to teach the other farmers not only the technicality of how to take unconventional crops. Like for example, Konkan is known for what crop? Konkan area in Maharashtra? Konkan area. Konkan area?
Rice.
Right, rice. Right? It's known for rice. What he has shown is that even these areas, technically you can grow crop like groundnut. Because this land remained so much flooded, and those students who participated, they did see that how he has innovatively used for the soils which remain flooded, how to grow groundnut. So in addition to that, he, for example, started this concept of agrotourism, and so he showed it to the his co-farmers as to how to earn not only economically well-being but also get a social dignity and place in society. And what he says that perhaps 20 years down the line the situations may come, because there is this migration that we saw through a curve, that you will have to catch up the urban people who are living in the big cities. I mean, he takes a little extreme end, and he says we may have to catch some of our friends who are living in villages and farming, and you have to catch them and say that, my 100 kgs of rice for next year, please, book it in advance for me. Those kind of days are likely to come. This was what he was saying. So, in the profession of agriculture, it actually has got push and pull. I have shown the arrows only from one side, but the arrows should be on both sides. So you have these science and technology methods which are coming from scientists and practitioners, the science practitioners. There, like agronomists, soil scientists, horticulture and biotech people, engineers and technologists who design machines, irrigation and processing techniques. Then you have these trends and trades, trends and trades. Do you see that there is a change in cropping pattern because of this trade and trends? Anybody can give quickly an example that there is a shift in cropping, type of crops you take, because there is a push from a trade. Cash crops, right? People tend to go. So, no sooner you have sugar factory in the region, people will shift from cereals to sugar because it gives you cash. Because Professor Mahadani in last lecture established that the sugarcane farmers who give sugarcane to the sugar factories cannot expect fast cash. They get cash, but not fast cash. They have to wait for a year or 1.5 years or something. So for fast cash, what was the alternative he suggested? Anybody remember? Instead of, so he said, you can make jaggery, which is unrefined sugar. So trade and trade, they keep sort of, say for example, peri-urban agriculture. Have you heard of this peri-urban agriculture? You know what is peri-urban agriculture? So nearby, let's say for example, Karjat or Panvel, these are peri-urban areas. Or if somebody is from Pune, all that area which is nearby Hinjewadi, which is the IT hub, is all peri-urban. People there are growing different things now. What 20 years back their forefather was growing. So they have shifted to things like vegetables, okay, which gives them cash. And so this is what is a trend and trade. Then the natural resources, climate, ecology and environment, for example.
Is there a tremendous pressure on different kinds of land you wish to carry out in India? Because if you look at the way things are exploding in New Bombay, right? What used to be a place you never heard of, and now that is within the bounds already within 5 years.
Absolutely. So I'm going to cover a case of this Abhinav Farmers Club, which is in stone's throw away from Hinjewadi, right? TCS, Infosys and all those guys. This throw falls into a farmers club called Abhinav Farmers Club. So that third case study which I'll be telling you is from that, and how, for example, he saved himself and about 108 of his farmer club members from getting land converted to NA. Right? You know what is NA, non-agricultural. Right? So in order to have this urbanization and industrial expansion and all that, one converts the land resource from agriculture use to non-agriculture use, so that they are allowed to sort of, build real estate and things like that. So he came up, the gentleman who started with Mr. Jnaneshwar Bodke, who started this Abhinav Farmers Club. He sort of, started with 10 farmers, and within 10 years, he started sometime in 2004, and in 10 years, for example, from 10, he has about 3,500 farmers who are associated with him in this club. So we see that, so this natural resource, climate, ecology, environment, see, newer and newer varieties are basically developed, for example, water resistant variety, right? Somebody, she talked about Rajinder Singh, comes from a arid area, where water is always a problem. So the plant breeders, we give a task that, can you develop a variety which can sort of, of whatever, rice or wheat or other cereals, which can grow in arid region with that much scanty rainfall, available underground water resource. Okay, so this is a task which is given to plant breeder. Or otherwise, if you are in Bangladesh, for example, where the topography, it seems, changes every year. What was land last year, it becomes water. So there, they have sort of, developed varieties of 6 feet rice, so flood prone areas. So you have like two extremes, like in Rajasthan, for example, you want to have a dry land variety which can grow in very less water, whereas other, for example, in Bangladesh. So this is what is natural resource. So that also influences the profession of agriculture. Then the government policies, subsidies and promotions, right? So you would have heard of a thing called MSP of central government, right? Minimum support price, right? Minimum support price. So wherever there is a minimum support price for different commodities, people take to grow that and wait for some kind of. So there would be, for example, subsidy like for drip irrigation. Now drip irrigation laga, you will get 50% of whatever. So that's why I'm saying the agriculture profession gets influenced by these kind of promotional policies or subsidies or something like that. So this is what is the total sort of profession, and what are the push and pulls that happens to a profession of agriculture. So I will not go into the definitions and all that, you can see it in the Wikipedia. But what does basically agriculture is for? What is the output from agriculture? What is the output of a farming?
Basic commodities.
Food.
Commodities.
What else? Feed. Feed. Then food, feed and fiber. Basically 3 years, right? Food, feed and fiber. Cotton, for example, jute. So that is how it is defined. So food, feed, fiber, and so also, this is a concept which is in our country. If you go to Europe or if you go to America or Australia, for example, they don't include animals in the farm. They say dairy is a total. But for example, here in India, dairy is not considered as a separate business. It's sort of joined with agriculture. So also you have animal husbandry there. So that is etymology. Now, how does this sector of agriculture compare with the other sectors? Okay, so significance of farming, as you have seen for India, just after the independence, we said something like 51% of the GDP was contributed by agriculture. Now it has come down to something like 15 to 20%. Now why? Because you have industrialization which has happened, And for the first time, what the literature says is services sector in 2006 was the first. So you have services, manufacturing and agriculture, right? These are the three important sectors which contribute to the GDP. In 2006, for the first time in the history, that services sector overtook the other agriculture and the manufacturing. So despite the fact that agriculture employs over 1/3 of the world's population, agriculture production accounts for less than 5%. So we said that overall, I mean, globally, its contribution will be less than 5%, but of course in India's case it's 50%. So there are some more facts. What I would majorly want to cover here was like, what green revolution brought. And we also said that while we had green revolution, we cannot, I mean, there's no proven concept of having evergreen revolution. So what we did in green revolution was we brought that much more area under cultivation. We extended the irrigation facilities. We have now something like 19% of our total land area is irrigated agriculture, right? 19% is irrigated and about 81% is rain-fed, right? So we brought that, and then there is a limit on that. How much you can irrigate is, for example, what we are told now that dam engineering, not dam engineering, sorry, for the English language. So anybody is a civil engineer? Civil engineering? Anybody who has done before? Nobody? Okay. So I was told that in the pedagogy or syllabus of civil engineering, dam is only in textbooks now. You learn it only for your structural engineering. Because no more dams will be built apparently, large dams, right? Because of the problems we know, the ecological problems we have and all that. So no more major dams. What we would have is check dams, Rajendra Singh, Joe and those kind of water conservation structures. Likelihood of having bigger dams, because apparently, other than those gigantic rivers, Ganga river for example, there is no perennial flowing rivers in our parts. The dams have blocked the water. Many a times you see that the come months of January, February up to June, these rivers, you just see a basin, a dry basin. You don't have a perennial river. There are only seasonal rivers now. Only seasonal rivers, other than the Ganga of course. So extension of irrigation facilities constrained or limited. Use of better seeds, better techniques, water management and crop protection. So these were the three things which actually helped green revolution and the green revolution or the result. So I would like to take you to the post-green revolution thing. So that's what I said. The FAQ in this domain of agriculture is, can we have evergreen revolution? So that's a question which the farming community and the professionals are asking. Is it possible to have that? So when you see, for example, goals for a central government or the planning bodies, what are the roles or goals for agriculture? That you have to secure food, you have to ensure food quality, and you have to ensure food safety. So you see, for example, it's in the journey of Indian agriculture, for example, 1970s, 80s, when the Green Revolution came, it was for food security, wanting to have being self-reliant or something. Now we are sort of we are worrying about the quality of the food and safety of food. So see, it's as I said, here was the self-sufficiency. Now we want to look for self-nutrition sufficiency. Although we are producing something like 220 million tons of food grains, is everybody getting that? Getting the nutrition. So food security, and now we are into nutrition security. So these are, of course, these are the direct goals, and indirect goals of poverty reduction, conservation, environmental impact, and economic stability. This is important for India because agriculture is never taken as something like a business. It's taken as a livelihood support system. It's part of the livelihood system. Now, here was one case study. Gujarat is talked quite a bit of late. People are talking about Gujarat modeling and that. Now here, see, there was some kind of a international scenario which made diamond business stopped. And there were, I think, that many, there is some number somewhere, but a large number, about 50 to 60,000 people were sort of, laid off in Surat, for example, city like Surat. Now, where do they go? It's like Mumbai. If you now travel from Ghatkopar to New Bombay, there used to be a lot of these, textile mills earlier. Now all the textile mills are closed and they have become malls.
Even Parel, no?
Parel, from Parel to Mulund, for example, you see, a lot of industries closed and those have become the malls now. Now those people who were sort of, skilled workers in those textile mills, what do? They have no alternative but to go back. Because of this mall culture and the people, IT sector and all that, the kind of cost of living going up, and their skills cannot be used somewhere else. It's exactly the case of these people who were in diamond cutting. So apparently agriculture is the only profession which can sort of provide a sponge which can absorb these people who are laid off. Okay, so this is one of the characters that we want to bring off this agriculture sector here. So from 1950 to 2000, majorly, this is given in this handbook, right here, handbook of agriculture, that productivity gains were something like 3.5 times in food grain, about 1.6 times in fruits, 2.1 times in vegetable, aquaculture, you have milks and eggs. So it was possible, for example, from 1950 to 200. Now can that be in a straight line? From 2000 to 2030, can we have these kind of productivity gains? Is a question. So now post-green revolution, what I wanted to bring to you, that there is kind of a technological fatigue in our agriculture. Does anybody know the two things which brings the technological fatigue? We can say due to green revolution. What the technological fatigue is there in agriculture? Anybody knows what are those two parameters? One is soil health. You keep on giving fertilizers. When I was a child, for example, and when I was a school-going child, in the area which I came from, the farmers would take sugarcane yield of something like 100 to 120 tons per acre. 100, 120 tons. Now in the same area, children of those farmers, if they get something like 30 to 40 tons per acre, they consider themselves lucky. We consider themselves. So in one generation, in my own time, for example, I have seen the soils have become that much sick, soils have become saline, over irrigation, over fertigation, over fertilizers. That has made the soil sick and the productivity has come down. So when we, on one hand, you have a demand which is rising, we said 30% more. Now here as you can see, for example, almost 50% or more, the productivity has come down. Okay, so this is one, soil health. Another reason of technological fatigue is water. Where does water come from? Earlier you had the surface water. Like you had rains, you had this surface water. People in Punjab and Haryana, for example, went to the groundwater. As a BTech student, I happened to go to Haryana and stay there for 2 months for my industrial training in an institute, I forget the name, but it worked on underground water. The Central Soil Salinity Research Institute, CSSRI. There's a place called Karnataka. Near that I stayed. And that time, it was sometime around 1976. Makes me old now. 1976 and now. So few now have been born. You were born? Right? So that time, 5 feet, 10 feet you have the water. In Karnal, in Haryana, in Punjab, 10 feet down you go, you have. Now the same places you go, 200 feet, you don't find water. You have to go deeper. You come to Marathwada, there is a region in Maharashtra called Marathwada, Aurangabad, Parvani. Our friend has left, I think. Anybody is from that area, Parvani, Aurangabad? Or anybody has traveled to that area? Aurangabad, yeah? You have traveled there. You have to go something like 1,800 feet, 1,000 feet, 1,400 feet. Isn't that water mining? 1,400 feet, 1,400 feet. So that's another technological frontier. The water resources are just depleting and then you have to go that much down. So this is what we call soil health and availability of water is something which has been. So water table going down and soil sickness, these are the two reasons. Now in any production, for example, the production management, the industrial engineers would talk about approach of 3M earlier. What was that approach 3M? Anybody knows what was 3M?
Material, machinery,
Machinery,
Men, machine, materials. Right? So the same thing now we talk about in material, we have energy and water. So we look the footprints for energy footprint or you talk about energy intensity or energy intensity of different, producing different commodities. Like they say aluminum is most energy intensive. Why? Because in order, so how they compare, for example, these productions is in order to have, let's say 10,000 rupees of GDP, how much of energy you are using for, so it allows you to do normalization, comparing different products, different processes, that how energy intensive is the process, how water intensive is the product. So, say for example, for the same product, you want to make paper, for example, paper like this, okay, so there are different processes. Then you compare these processes with you have a process A, process B, process C. How much of these are costing me in terms of water, in terms of energy, right? And then of course labor and capital. In economics, typically this is called a factor endowment approach. These are factors of production. How much men you need to create 1 lakh rupees of, See that's why, for example, there is an organization called KVIC. How many of you have heard of KVIC? Anybody know what is KVIC? Khadi and Village Industries Commission. So they have some kind of a norm, they would give you initial capital, 70% of initial capital. They will sanction your scheme or project if you are employing 1 person per lakh of investment. Right? So which means if you are asking for 25 lakhs, you must have how many people? You must engage 25 people. Because their economics at KVIC says that it should be a labor intensive, so this is kind of an employment generation, employment creating. So they will give you grant only if you bring, you try and engage in your production 1 person per 1 lakh. I think that had changed now, maybe this was something 5 years back when I was working on your project. That this was the guideline and there is a logic, we will not get into that, but there is a logic how that number is. 1 lakh, 1 person per 1 lakh invested comes into production. So this is what we also need to use these principles which people use in the industries, in agriculture as well. Right, so this we have seen already. So water use for agriculture is expected to increase by 14%. So where will this water come from? 14% increase in water. As we are saying that groundwater is depleting, the sources of available, no more dams being constructed. So we have to sort of, have water conservation.
So the water is piped from rural areas from places like Bombay.
Right.
Where you're not supposed to use that water in the rural context because urban usage is increasing. So that's another burden.
Sure. So a lot of that conflict, for example, the Deputy Chief Minister of this state was into a big problem, because he has diverted water to the industrial areas. So use of water. So he was, for example, transporting water for about 60 kilometers to give it to MIDC. MIDC is Maharashtra Industrial Development Corporation. And that was transported from a distance, and so prioritization of water, whether it should go for industry first or whether it should go for drinking purposes or it should go for agriculture.
Maharashtra apparently has, I don't know, should double check, highest number of dams in the world per whatever, 150 kilometers, whatever, per kilometer if you want to call it even that. The number of dams in Maharashtra is highest in the world, built.
Right.
At what stage of repair or disrepair, that's another. But so irony is multiplied.
So one of the dams called Jayakodi Dams, for example, it is in somewhere near Paitan, near Aurangabad, right? Jayakodi Dam. So it was sort of estimate, the civil engineers gave the estimate when the project was made that it would take something like 75 years to silt it. But that silting, the same quantum of silting occurred in 20 years. So you know the problem in a dam. What happens when it gets silted?
Water storage.
Water holding capacity goes down. So then you can't deliver. You said that the command area for a dam X, let's say in this case Jayatwadi, is that many thousand hectares based on the engineer's calculation when it was built. Now when you have something like 60 to 70% silting in 20 years, 15 to 20 years, now definitely your command area is going to come down. Right? So this is one of the...
Because silt is also a lost because
It's a topsoil. It's a topsoil.
Exactly.
It takes, they say, it takes something like 100 years to build that 1 feet top layer of soil. You know, therefore the industry like brick making, for example, was attacked. That, you know, you're making bricks in 3 weeks, you're using clay which was formed in 100 years of fertile land. And most of the brick kilns are near the river, right? You might have observed. Most of these burned bricks, right? Anybody who has not seen a brick kiln, please raise hand. Nobody has seen. Nobody has seen.
That was also the opposition to Lalu Prasad Yadav's Kullad.
Fuller, right. Of course, that was in a much smaller one, but
They
bricks.
were doing it for Indian Railways for many years. And there was some complaints about how topsoil was getting.
So as we said, you know, 100 years it takes to get the fertile land. Organic carbon of something like 2%, 2 or 3%. Right? You came there, Shekhar Batsal claimed to have his, the agriculture soil about 7 to 8%, you know, which is with higher claim, but you know, minimum 8 to 2%, 2 to 3% that should have organic matter. It takes 100 years to get that kind of fertile land. Okay, so now what is the connection between agriculture and industry? So you have the industry which provides fertilizer, pesticides, diesel, logistic concepts of that. And the agriculture, what it keeps is raw material, right? We have sugarcane, oilseed, jute, cotton, tobacco. So there is a good connection between the interdependence is there, right? So this I think I will skip because I think I have maybe another 15-20 minutes. So I'll skip this because I still have not come to my case study. So this was actually a list of problems that we had a group on agriculture and related technologies. So we made a list of what are the pressing problems during this recent MIT IIT meet. Most of you were there, right? Most of you were there. Okay, so my case 1 is food processing, and I'm just saying food processing is one of the agro-based industries or agro-industries. And this is what I've taken it from some CII McKinsey report. So what you see here is what comes to our dinner table is only that much of portion, okay, of the apple that is grown. So what is happening to the other things? It's getting lost in the distribution, right? It's getting lost into the distribution. So this actually the CII was trying to make a case that, you know, if you increase packaging, for example, or cold storages, for example, you can reduce the losses, and that was the case that they were trying to make. That this stuff which is grown with so much of a difficulty, we just talked about soil losses, water losses, and the hard labor of these agriculturists, you know, farmers, which is grown with that much of, you know, and in that much of time, 4 to 5 months of season, it just gets wasted like this in the chain, and that's not done. So that brings us our case for a food processing. So now I will also speak with what it brings. This is from one of my recent visits to Europe and US. That these kind of agro-based industries, what does it bring? You know, it brings connectivity, infrastructure, education, economic development in the area. So this also I'll step because I think this is going to be on the Moodle, you know. So what interesting thing here, what I liked was, you know, the way they termed it. So on this axis you have, for example, the size of the market, and this is on this axis, y-axis, we have the growth potential. And they said that, you know, whatever falls in here, you activate. Here you can ruminate, you know, wait, keep thinking. Here completely discard, just liquidate, and this is something consolidate. Okay, so when you have a large growth and not so high growth rate, I mean the high market size, so you can still think of. But what you need to pick up is the commodities, for example, which are on this quadrant, okay, which has a higher size of the market as well as higher growth rate. So you can just see that, and these are, if you see, for example, these are something which are staples: milk, fresh fruits, bakery, confectionery is not staple, but you
Some
have
are also
dairy products.
Other kinds of staples.
Other kinds of. Okay, so, but what are the major challenges in food processing? Normally I ask this as a question, but now because of amount of time, we just, one of the major challenge of food processing industry in our country is telling people that processed food is also good for you, can also be more nutritious. So that's a challenge. Why? Because even me, I would prefer a fresh mango than a canned mango, right? Given a choice. But the problem is mango is not grown throughout the year. It's only 3 months, right? April, May, June. If you want to have a mango ice cream, you need to can it. You need to process, you need to pulp it, put it in the can, and sort of, have a longer shelf life. Okay, so that's one of the challenges in India. Consumer education that processed food are also good for you. Any one quick example that processed food is good? Iodized namak. I give an example of iodized namak, which has worked wonders for a disease, right? Right? So that was processed and
What you would, I don't want to take your time away, but what is also interesting is that the other kind of, information that is coming to you is that try to avoid, if you read
preservatives and
so there is this
chemicals, yeah. So there is this conundrum or what we call this kind of a conflicting views. Processing doesn't necessarily mean preservation. I mean, using chemical preservatives. Processing also means making atta. Now I think most of the housewives are buying atta. 10 years back, when I or 20 years back when I came to IIT, my wife would send me each 15 days to atta chakki. Now she doesn't. Now she has trusted. Over 20 years, now she has been convinced by Pillsbury or whatever, that atta is okay. I mean, it is not that they use lower quality wheat. She had in her mind that you buy atta, which means it must have been used from a lower quality of wheat. Therefore, she wants to see in her eyes what wheat she has bought. You give it to me, ask me to go to the chakki and get so that change. But for example, now, so there are some of these. Now, price elasticity. What is this? What does this mean? Price elasticity. Right? Price elasticity means the size. For example, they give the example of this parachute oil. You have seen pouches. 1 rupee, 2 rupee pouch. So that's something which for example, brought this kind of you can have that kind of a convenience, and then distribution network, cold chain. Of course, we just saw that the apple size shrinks till the time it comes to your dinner table. So can we have a distribution network or cold chain? What is post-harvest physiologist? The post-harvest physiologist tells us is grapes, for example, if they have to go from Nashik to, let's say, they will send it to Europe, from Nashik to Europe. So from the time it is harvested and from the time it comes, the first, 2 days, 3 days are extremely important. So the post-harvest physiologist tells us that if you store it in temperatures below 15 degrees, you can save something like 25% of its cost. So now what we brought is like, those refrigerated vans from Nashik to Mumbai. It's about 5 hours, 6 hours of journey. So that would come in those refrigerated vans where you maintain temperature of 15 degrees Celsius. So the post-harvest loss in the grapes can be drastically reduced. 25% is drastic, right? 20 to 25% of loss in quality can be saved if you just play with the temperature, with the cold chain. So that gives you sort of, so this was the challenge, and we have now the refrigerator. And one of our faculty members in mechanical engineering worked on a project where he used the same engine power, the same engine which is driving the truck to give you the refrigeration effect. How nice it is, right? The same engine which is driving you the truck, the grapes, can provide you part of its power from that engine to give you a refrigeration output. Because see, 15 degrees is not like a fridge temperature. You know what is the fridge temperature, right? 4 degrees Celsius. Or it's not 0 or sub-zero or something. So 15 degrees Celsius from 30 or 35 degrees of ambient temperature to 15 degrees Celsius does make a difference, then I will not go into the PepsiCo. You can just Google it, PepsiCo, how they, their the plant of tomato ketchup, how they did the backward integration, how they did the contract farming. It seems typically the farmers in that area, Haryana and Punjab, where they have put up the plant, the typical yield was 1 ton per acre of tomatoes. Okay, and they took it to something like 20 to 30 tons per acre, because they needed this commodity. So they tied up, they engaged into a contract farming. So this is something a challenge, and apparently the Israelis have come out with a technique of greenhouses, of precision agriculture, where they play with the density of the tomato, the water content goes down, and you can get something like 100 tons per acre. Look at 1 ton and 100 tons. So you can, yes, sir.
Do we have checks in place?
Little louder, I can't hear.
My voice is in So do we have checks in place that for quality control and food adulteration, these are all things which also come into play. So the process.
Absolutely, absolutely. So now in 2006 we have a food act or a food law, which has a sort of, in 2006 the act came into place, and now we have a organization called FSSAI, Food Standards and Safety Association of India. So under this FSSAI umbrella you have FDAs in each state. So the food quality is a state subject, and their muscle is so strong. They at one time, I remember first time 5 years back, they had stopped a company called Distillery because it was not meeting the regulatory standards or norms. So there is a mechanism that all these food processing industries, in fact they came along the Mithi River, all those restaurants also they wanted to spread, but for some other reason that they wanted to, these FDA inspectors wanted to show their power to these restaurants. But more or less all the food processing industry comes under the FDA, and there is this kind of a regulatory norm which is so now that brings me to the second case study, which is appropriate mechanization. So you have most of, so this was something which was witnessed by our friends from Sitara, right? They did not get to do the transplanting, but they saw people were doing it, and this can be a very, very fascinating, drudgery driven. If we are asked to work like this for 20 minutes, my goodness, Shekhar told us, although your students want to do transplanting, there were some students who were enthusiastic and wanted to go into the knee-deep mud, but it is extremely, so this demands that there is some kind of a mechanization that comes. Second is like groundnut planting, as you can see you have to bend that many times. Anybody from IDC, any students? Yeah, you are from IDC. So we have our colleague named Professor G.G. Ray. He works on ergonomics, right? And one of your senior is going to work on this toolkit for a farmer who is less than 2 acre size. He's going to work on the toolkit for that, and he just met me today. And say for example, how can we sort of remove, because there are some norms in ergonomics. You don't ask a human being to bend that many times, or you don't ask a human being to carry more than 23 kgs. Right, 23 kg is a norm, but many times you see that this agricultural laborer is carrying, either the produce or the seedlings or something. So what kind of machine? So that's why you call it as an appropriate mechanization. So you see, for example, this kind of mechanized seeder, or you can see a power weeder. Even in our main building lawns, at times I don't know whether they still continue to use it, but there are 2 laborers who sort of pull that, okay, but it's a small farm, it's okay, but you can sort of, one can use these kind of devices which avoid that many times bending and doing the drudgery work tasks. Now, another opportunity for food processing industry, I always give this example. Does anybody know what is this DILT syndrome? Double income, no time. Now this is an opportunity for a food processing engineer. How can you give convenience food to this family, nuclear family in urban area, which has no time to cook? What kind of convenient food that you can bring in? So so that within 20 minutes you can sort of, so there is some food which is called ready to eat, RTE, but there is something which is called RTC. You know what is it? Ready to cook. Ready to cook. Like rice, for example, would come in the pouches, you just put it in the boiling water and you have your rice in 2 minutes. Like 2-minute noodles. 2-minute noodles. Which we didn't have it when I was a child. I didn't have a 2-minute Maggi noodle. Okay, so this is another thing which we really have a lifestyle which is even in smaller towns, not in big towns. And you know what is the biggest advantage of a mall like this, food mall like this? What is the biggest advantage? You get to feel your product. Get to feel. Otherwise you go to Kirana store, you just have to stand outside his counter and say, I want that, I want this. Right? So you have an orange juice which is let's say of any brand, Real for example, and that pack is something which is bulged. Right? One doesn't buy that packet. You know the reason? Why you don't buy a packet of orange juice, which is in a cardboard carton, and it's bulged.
Air is always
It is fermented, it has given, so it's no good. Right? But in a local Kirana store, you don't get used. Here in malls, so this is a style. So this is what I'm saying is the kind of opportunities for the food processing engineer. And further, what I would say is, like currently we are consuming the per capita consumption of food is something like 100 grams. But the nutrition from the recommended dietary RDAs, for example, which you see in NIM Hyderabad's handbook of nutrition, that in order to have a balanced diet, you must eat something like 140 grams per day of fruits.
Inflation is coming in the way.
Something like antioxidants and things like that.
So inflation is coming in the way.
Inflation is coming in the way. And vegetables, something like 270 grams per day. Of course, they say that proverb is now no more good. The apple a day keeps the doctor away. You know the reason? Because it seems the phytochemistry of the apple is changed. 30 years back, whatever apple gave you some kind of nutrients, some 50 the essential components in that apple are no more available what was available 30 years back. So that proverb is not true. So you have to eat an apple plus 2 bananas. Okay. So this is something, for example, the opportunity for food. How do you achieve this? How do you achieve this? To get the balanced diet, what can role the food processing engineering can have? Now, this is the last case study for this evening. This was a project, as I mentioned, of deploying ICT in agriculture, which is IVR's mobile-based system for performance efficiency in production of agriculture and the supply chain. And so this was a DST, natural resource database management. So I worked with a colleague of Professor Ganesh Ramakrishnan in the CSE department. So this is the Abhinav Farmers Club. What it tells you is that if you have a half an acre or 1 acre farm, how do you use precision agriculture, for example? And this is in a peri-urban area where they are pushed and pushed and pushed to convert from agriculture to NA so that there can be a real estate. And what has happened to this Gnaneshwar Bodke who started it, some of his friends who sold his land, their land, they are kind of a peons or clerks or something like that.
But they are largely focusing on
Vegetable.
high-end exotic vegetables.
Exactly, because there is a huge market.
Yes, the
And so they can-
farmers market that brings food from Nashik to Sayandarai.
Yeah.
That's how it is. Like this is all 300 rupees a kilo standard price, The other foods only 120 rupees a kilo.
Right, because what this Gnaneshwar Bodke, the chief promoter of Abhinav Farmers Club, promises that from half acre, how do you get 1,000 rupees per day, which is about 3 lakh rupees from half acre or 1 acre. So that is his model, that is one model. And now he's, as I was saying, that he has about 3,000 farmers across Maharashtra. He started the movement with 10 farmers in Hijewadi, Pune. And now he has something like 3,000 farmers. So he came and he approached us, the Abhinav Farmers Club, communicated the need to automate their supply order system. And see, because what is happening is most of these people, the housing societies, people are engaged in IT. For order, you communicate to them 2 o'clock in the afternoon, busy in meeting. 4 o'clock in the afternoon, busy in the meeting. So they don't pick up phone. Now how do you get the orders? So he said, instead of manual, can you automate it? So the IVRS, for example, which is used by other sectors, banks, railways, airlines, how can we use that for example, in this agriculture, and both, for example, in order to give this advisory to farmers, guidance to the farmers, what farming technology to practice, how much to produce. So 4 months, for example, he tells that, choti wangi, small brinjal, or gawar को इंग्लिश में क्या बोलते हैं? गवार सब लोग जानते हैं गवार, खेडूत में गवार को क्या बोलते हैं? गवार is a vegetable, green, Indian peas, we can call Indian peas. Okay. So this, for example, allows them to plan 4 months in advance and gives, for example, the advice. So you have a farmer here, you have an expert sitting here. On the mobile, it gives you. So, for example, the farmer observes that there is some kind of a fungus which has come on his cabbage. He doesn't know. So he can sort of place that inquiry, and you have an expert sitting here who advises. So this is not only to the IVRS system which is developed, is not only to take the orders, but also sort of communicate between the experts and with not much of cost. Most of the farmers, for example, have the mobile system, so this system is built on the mobile. Expert believes that he has some video link which he thinks he can be useful to the farmers and wants to send it to the farmers. See, for example, you have heard of a NGO called Digital Greens. Anybody has heard? Right?
Yeah.
Delhi-based NGO, Digital Greens. There are lots of videos. Right? You go Google, for example, for Digital Greens on their website. You will see that videos are created by these farmers, successful farmers, on how to install a drip irrigation system. What kind of pesticides to use. How do I do my intercultural operations like weeding? Now when the farmer himself sees that other farmer has created this, he gets challenged, inspired, that why can't I adopt? And now here is a way to teach him through a video. Okay, so this is something which is possible using this IVRS system, and the focus of work is to develop actually a trusted network of farmers who need advice and to retrieve their problem. Identify experts whom they can sort of get the information. So AFC itself is a repository of knowledge and technology packages. BIAF, which is another NGO in the area. Then we have Jalavardhani Pratishthan and some organic farmer who is a practitioner of organic farming, and NIF of course is there, and MOFF is Maharashtra Organic Farmers Federation. Okay, you know that every Sunday there is a farmers market in Staff Club here.
Yeah.
You are aware that every Sunday there is near the hospital. We have a small area which is between Gulmohar and the hospital, which is called Staff Club. Every Sunday there is a farmers, and this was actually facilitated by this organization called MOF, Maharashtra Organic Farmers Federation. So they organize this trade and focus on voice and text-based services for people, like text to speech and speech to text. Right? So you have ordered, so this is Abhinav. You dial that particular number, you get Abhinav Farmer Club में आपका स्वागत है. आपकी आज की ऑर्डर हरी भरी टोकरी आपके घर में डिलीवर की जाएगी. आपकी ऑर्डर स्टार के बाद स्टार दबा के कर दीजिए. Then the person will sort of even if he is not there, he can record the voice that I want this in my Hari Bari Tokri. Okay, and that, for example, it can be converted into a text, speech to text, and text to speech. Okay, so this is an advantage of this IVRS system, and so these are some of these videos, as you can see, we are sort of so for want of time, I will not show you. There is a video on this particular project. Those who are interested can sort of I have given the link of that particular video here. So this is actually created by Microsoft Research. It's called Video Kheti. Okay, Video Kheti, and we have joined hands with them. With these 3 case studies and lot of information about agriculture domain, what's happening to it, and the case studies on food processing, and then this initially you saw, some of you saw a nutrition film, right? How we have set up a small scale plant in Dharavi, near Sion Hospital. How we have put up a small plant, a food processing engineer put up this plant to create a specialized food. So with these case studies, I would like to conclude, and concluding remarks, I would say that these are exciting times in India to be associated with new ventures, and the right ecosystems can be formulated. Okay, there are opportunities galore, as they say. Also, the sky is the limit in this domain. You know, in other domains, for example, taking efficiencies from 70 to 72% is so tough in the chemical industry, for example. You know, you talk to Professor Mahazani, you know, taking 1 or 2% efficiencies is so difficult. But here, the efficiencies, you know, the gap is so much.
Disruption.
Huh?
Disruption is possible.
Disruption is possible here. Innovation, disruptive innovation is possible. Need is to create innovative success stories and role models to case studies. Once you have role models and case studies like Abhinav Farmers Club, if Professor Mahazani allows us, we can take a trip to Pune. It will be a 5-hour trip, and we can just go and see. And he teaches, for example, the students come there from different Andhra Pradesh, Karnataka, and all that. He teaches how, if you have half acre of land and one of our MTech students is planning to go there, Kankla, you're planning to go there, and he teaches all this technique that you have. And then, you know, like this is a much stronger message of case studies for farming and these kind of communities to sort of create impact. Concerted efforts of government, academia and NGOs, industry will do wonders to achieve drudgery reduction. This is extremely important, we have seen this, and dignity and socio-economic value to the sector. That I stop here and welcome your questions. Yes.
Actually, like we talking about the basic fundamental was to create self-sufficiency in food production. But actually, at the competition high side, the farmers are eventually being made dependent on, as you said, very input intensive and technology intensive. So, do they go together and how far do they go together? And most of the benefits of relying on technology would be affordable by the large and farmers who have, a farm of size bigger and I was just thinking that how do we address that trade-off? Like, on one hand we want self-sufficiency food grain, but on the other hand without dependence being created on technology and I'm just confused.
Exactly, yeah, true. So what I'm saying is, therefore, we don't want this Monsanto lobbies, right? Terminator seeds,
Yeah.
GM crops.
Yeah.
One of the strongest reasons there is opposition is it builds dependence. There are always these thoughts on alternative agriculture, for example, which does not depend on the even hybrids, right? So there is this efforts by the agriculture university system or ICR system to promote, let's say, hybrid rice varieties. Like we visited that center, rice research center in Karjal, and they say that that progeny or the hybrid seeds, you cannot continue using it. Maximum you can use is 3 times. Whereas the conventional crops that you had, you can use whatever is like, you can store it and you can use it for the next season. So there is this kind of a what we call alternative agriculture system, and the questions are not always simpler, and the sustenance of small farming systems is always under the sort of constrained situations. There are so many pushes and pulls. How does he sustain vis-a-vis a large farmer? A large farmer can afford to sell his whatever grains at 2,000 rupees per ton. But the small farmer who is making only 1 ton of rice per acre, how does he sustain? How does he support? Yes, the question is sort of very relevant. And there are sort of, for example, there is a big, in alternative agriculture, this one, they are considering that people are now converging only on 2 cereals, rice and wheat. Whereas you go to any tribal community, they eat, nachni, they eat millets. We've all forgotten. So because of the, as I said, the trade and trends, make the cropping pattern change, right? So And therefore, if you see processed food, for example, the bread, you will see that multiple grains, 7 cereals, 7 grains. You have a bread, the modern or what Britannia brings a bread now, which is not only wheat. If you see the constituents of that, it will say multi-grain. Because what has happened is we are not eating any more crude fibers. We're just eating the fine cereals.
Usually atta also has the same.
Pillsbury or atta, then a fortified atta. Yes, I agree. Any other question? Yes.
Does organic farming really have the capacity to address our demands, the food, increasing food supply demands? There's so much advocacy for organic farming.
Right.
I mean,
The person to lead for that is Vandana Shiva. She will convince you.
I read her argument side.
Yeah. It's a pretty solid argument with Navadhanya and what she's been doing for the last 25 years. It's not just subsistence farming for her group of farmers. They are producing surplus, and they are sustaining biodiversity. So there are incredible long-term benefits for it as well.
And there is a great
demand.
there is a great deal of debate on this. Can organic deliver? Because see, for example, for organic fertilizers, for an equal amount, let's say if you have 100 kgs of superphosphate or urea, for that you need to perhaps have 400 to 500 kgs of organic manure. Now where do you get that from? If you really have to sort of feed or cultivate that many hectares, do we have really sufficient biomass? This is one school of thought, that can organic deliver, creating 220 million tons of whatever grains that we have, or 80 million tons of fruits and vegetables. Where do we get that biomass from? Will it not be competing the land which is dedicated for the cropping for the other? Because say for example, there are crops which are used as mulching crops. They call it in US, they call mowing down your crop into the that land in order to get that organic carbon. So 1 year they would not grow any, do any crop agronomy. They would do only this organic. They will grow grass, things like Napier and they will mow down that crop and put it in the field to create the organic carbon. But can we afford that? Can we afford that? So that's a question.
So the alternative is that the soil gets worse and worse.
So it's more than that actually. It leads like the water. This is when you were talking about Ravinder Singh earlier. One of the remarks that he makes is in the Green Revolution, हमने कुछ देर के लिए अपना पेट भरा और धरती का पेट खाली कर दिया. That's what he says. The water tables have gone down so tremendously because of the demand, intensive demand for artificial fertilizer and huge amounts of water. But that is not sustainable either. The counter argument is not organic.
Collect it at the end and collect.
Sustainable. And it is also a way of doing it. I mean, we are losing topsoil into these dams, silts and silted lakes and stuff like
Soil
that.
erosion.
Huge amount, and deforestation is causing soil
इधर
erosion.
दे दीजिए.